Hello, we are here today to talk about the Black Panthers, not everything about the Black Panther Party, but specifically about the 10-point program. When we decided today to talk about some element of Black history, we had a lot of options, as you can imagine. And when we decided on the Black Panther Party, there were so many possibilities of what we could talk about. Were we going to talk about the breakfast program or the community schools? Were we going to talk about how it was eventually dismantled? Or what element were we going to bring up? So today we're talking just about the 10-point program. So we want to, of course, remind people that we are all lead learners. If you are a teacher, we are learners if we are students. And everything that we're going to address today is by no means exhaustive. There's plenty more to learn about the Black Panthers than we're presenting in this moment. But we are going to just have a conversation. We're all family here. I'm about to introduce our participants. And we're just going to have a chat. And you can, whenever you see a green screen, you can take a pause and ask yourself that question or ask your students that question. Or you can listen for our answer and think about it on your own thereafter. So I'm going to get started with introductions. First, we have Miss Nadia Cox. She's the co-founder of Castleton University's NAACP chapter and the youth group co-chairman of the Rutland Area NAACP branch. Hi, Nadia.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks, Nadia. Next, we have Miss Addie Lensner, the co-founder of the Vermont Student Anti-Racism Network. Hi, Addie.
Hey.
Nice seeing you. Next up is our last young person, Mr. Tajay Edwards, president and co-founder of the Castleton University NAACP chapter. And he's also the Castleton representative on the VSCS Anti-Racism Committee. How are you doing, Tajay?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you for being here. And next up, we have our Rutland Area Branch NAACP President, Miss Mia Schultz. Hi, Mia.
Hey, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with you all.
And I am Dr. Alana Hart. I am VP3 here at the Rutland Area Branch in Vermont. So let's get started talking about the 10-point program of the Black Panther Party. First, let's think about what you want most in your own community. That community could be a school community, it could be a neighborhood, or it could be a community related to your demographic, right? It could be part of the Black community or the LGBTQ plus community. So what do we think we most want from our own communities?
So I know for my community, a sense of unity to acknowledge what minorities are going through, especially in Vermont, would be very influential, especially for future generations of BIPOC residents that want to move up to Vermont, because Vermont is not the most diverse state in our country. But just having respect to have those uncomfortable conversations with the BIPOC community, I feel like that would just create a wholesome togetherness, that we can understand each other's perspectives to a certain extent, that we respect each other.
Yeah, to piggyback off from Nadia, I do agree that we need a lot of safe spaces. We need more retention, because Vermont is becoming more diverse, and the only way we can retain those people is incorporating and creating resources and spaces where we can include people, where they can feel like they matter or they're supposed to be here. So, in terms of spaces like the NAACP or different safe spaces where they can go and be themselves, or even just policies and procedures set in place where it is put on a pedestal that everyone is expected to be themselves and everyone is supposed to be themselves. And even resources like even salons to get their hair done, or barbershops to get haircuts. A lot of people have to travel way outside of Vermont to get those things done. So I think incorporating and developing things like that will make the community better.
I agree 100%. I think it's really important to have diversity in a community because it benefits everybody. And it's really important for people to be able to live their full identity and feel comfortable being themselves. And that's what Tajay was saying with those safe spaces being so important in community. So that's something I want to see. And I want to see just acceptance and inclusion within communities, that we all, learn from each other and take each other as we are with our mistakes, and just grow together is what I want to see in a community.
Wow, thank you guys so much for that. I think I hear a recurring theme that we all want to be free to be able to be ourselves in our communities. which to me is the biggest form of love, right? Love of the people around you, love of yourself. Self-love is important as well. Thank you guys so much for this conversation. I hope that other people in our audience and people watching this today also have these conversations about what community means to you and how that translates into love. So let's keep talking more about the Black Panther Party and what is the Black Panther Party? Who were they and who are they? They were originally named Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, and it was founded in 1966. And a lot of the philosophies and the ways that the Black Panther Party has been portrayed has been of a militant group or an extremist group. However, we know now that this was a history that was painted and manufactured by a government to kind of disempower the movement that was happening then. Even the NAACP has been juxtapositioned to be in contradiction with the values of the Black Panther Party. But in 2021, our national offices have established a resolution to create a national park or monument to recognize the history and the contributions of Black Panther Party. I think it's really important to note that these contributions and their ideologies in terms of how we should all be interacting with each other and how we should be able to live and thrive as human beings still are issues that still need to exist. And as we go through each point of their 10-point program, I would love for everybody to think about, has anything changed in the 50 odd some years since this 10-point program and the Black Panther Party established them?
Thank you, Mia. So when we first decided that the Black Panther Party was in fact the conversation we wanted to have, we knew there were so many different routes we could go. We could talk just about the community schools, or we could talk about their impact in other areas of the community. We could talk about the breakfast program. We could talk, and we could probably have an entire presentation just on their perspective on protecting women, or their beginnings, right? The origin story of protecting people against police brutality. So I just want to point out that we are focused on the 10-point program, but if you don't know a ton about the Black Panther Party, certainly learn more about them and certainly know that what we're presenting today is just on that one topic. So the 10-point program was drafted as a result of feeling really misunderstood by white America. And the picture you see here is part of that. Just seeing Black people with guns, automatically it became very easy, like Mia said, to recreate or misrepresent what was actually happening, that it was an effort to be protective, and to be in form of defense and not initiating any harm. And they were also created to just establish the group's goals, to say what direction the Black Panthers should always go in, and they would always do work that focused on these 10 points. So we're going to get to it. Let's talk about the first point and just have a little conversation.
So for the first point is that we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our Black and oppressed communities. We believe that Black and oppressed people will not be free until we are able to determine our destinies in our communities ourselves by fully controlling all the institutions which exist in our communities.
Great, Nadia. Thank you for reading that. Let's go right into a question regarding that and have a discussion. So what is the meaning of freedom to you, Nadia? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so for freedom, I always affiliate back to our national anthem, where it's the last line where it says, "O'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." For freedom, we should have the place where everyone feels at least belonged to what their perspectives are, what the sense of belonging to themselves, to their family, to their community. And I feel as if our country now is lacking that sense of freedom, where people can't be themselves without the fear of discrimination or the the sense of the consequences of law enforcement or governmental policies that are more lean towards the dominant race rather than the minorities of our country. So I feel as if freedom is a sense of unity, like a sense of belonging, how Mia was explaining that we all just need to love each other. We're all human. We're all, composed of the same cells, blood, all that. But for freedom, we need to respect each other's boundaries and perspectives and just create a sense of belonging where we can understand enough each other's perspectives, but just create a safe place where everyone gets the same benefits and affiliations within anything that they're doing in life.
Thank you, Dot. When I hear you talk like this, I think about our systems and how many barriers there are for some people. And that can be whether it's your race, it could be your gender, it could be the way that you identify with your sexuality. And those barriers keep us from, in my opinion, from being truly free to thrive in the way that we need to. And those are all embedded in lots and lots of policies, like you said. Does anybody else want to touch on that idea of freedom and what it might mean to you?
So I think that going back to what Mia had said about just like a community being one of love, I think that when we're thinking about that, a community has to be a place where people can be free to be who they are and come with their identity, with their race or sexuality or whatever identity that they bring, and know that they're going to be authentically loved for that identity. And I think a free country or just a free space is one where people can feel safe to be themselves.
Yeah, I do agree because I feel like freedom has a lot to do with, it starts with the laws, the policies, and even representation, because a lot of people, they ponder before they even twist the doorknob going out into each day, because they're not sure if they have the freedom to go out into the world and be their true, authentic, unapologetic self. And I feel like in terms of representation, if they see like police brutality being represented so often, they don't feel like they can even drive in America because of the link they create with that and the representation it brings. So I feel like a lot of freedom starts with representation and seeing what is acceptable and how you're treated in a community.
Ooh, thank you so much, Tajay, for bringing that into this space. You're right. We do have to stop and think sometimes, marginalized people in particular, about how to move and how can you be free if you're thinking about, if I'm getting in the car and I go down a certain road, will there be police there and will they bother me today? Right? And how can you really be free if you do not have that freedom to not think about those things when you walk out the door? Thank you so much for bringing that here.
Yeah, and I was thinking about what Addie said about what it means to bring your entire identity to a place and how that relates to freedom. And I don't have an answer, but it just made me think about the extensive like code switching we do as professionals or as college students, or I'm sure it happens with younger students too, right? Where your whole entire speech pattern changes depending on who you're around and how that may interrupt with your sense of belonging in a place and your sense of freedom in a place where, if you bring your entire self, you will not be viewed as a professional. You will not be viewed as smart, even though you're no less smart in those moments. So, and just a lot to think about.
Thank you. That we can talk about systems all day, but we can also talk about individuals and our interactions in everyday life and how we have been acculturated to accept only certain norms. Absolutely.
Right, because racism certainly happens at that systemic or government level, but also personally and also culturally, right? Interpersonal moments and cultural moments.
Amen. Thank you.
Sure.
So this is point 2. We want full employment for our people. We believe that the federal government is responsible and obligated to give every person employment or a guaranteed income. We believe that if the American businessman will not give full employment, then the technology and means of production should be taken from the businessmen and placed in the community so that the people of the community can organize and employ all of its people and give a high standard of living.
So what do we think? How does this concept and this point relate to the history of employment and free labor in this country?
I think when I think of free labor, of course, we think about the history of slavery in our country and what legacy that has left on today. And today, there are still huge wealth gaps, racial wealth gaps, and that leads to inequality in labor and in access to employment. There's racism within the systems of employment that leads to that white people might be more likely to get a job than a person of color. So there are a lot of systemic inequalities that still exist today. And so when we're talking about like labor and having like secure employment, there's still a lot of roadblocks in the way to that, leading up from history to today. And so I think that we have to try to remedy those and put the jobs back in the community, like the point was talking about, in order to have equity for everyone.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the opportunities and how a lot of us, our ancestors, they offered their blood, sweat, and tears. Not even offered, they had to give their blood, sweat, and tears due to slavery to work. And now we're in a space where we don't feel like, a lot of us even hesitate to check the box that we're Black, or we're looking for a job, because we don't want to be, overlooked even before we get started. And a lot of people, looking for a job, you're already thinking, is there a diversity spot, or is there a need for diversity before we can be considered? Because a lot of us feel like that's the only way companies and organizations take us, because they don't take us for the skills that we carry, we possess, they don't take us for our education and our background. A lot of us feel like we're limited to just a diversity spot, and that shouldn't be the case.
I agree with Taji. Just to touch upon more, I mean, like Addie said, we started off with slavery in our country, and it was the white men that were able to hold jobs, and then it led to Black men and white men who were able to hold jobs, and now women are able to, but there's still that sense of discrimination within women and the BIPOC community of employment. And whether it's like Taji said, that organizations and companies, especially in businesses, that they want that code of ethics, that they have diversity and inclusion in their business, but is it really that they are employing people of color and minorities based off of, to try to, reach that code of ethics so that their business looks good? Or are they trying to really look at us for our skills and assets and experiences? So the fallout is that that employment just needs to be based off of that person and their experience and what they can hold to or for the career that they're applying for, rather than based off of, the perspective of their color, race, religion, sexual orientation, and trying to meet that code of ethics.
I think about too, once you do get that job, let's say you get that job, and how difficult it is maneuvering within those employment spaces sometimes too. So thank you for that. Yeah, bringing that here in there, because going back to freedom, right? Back to point one, when we are there, and that whole acculturation of having to act and behave in a certain manner can affect your employment as well.
So we want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of our Black oppressed communities. So we believe that the racist government has robbed us, and we now are demanding the overdue debt of 40 acres and 2 mules. So 40 acres and 2 mules were promised 100 years ago as restitution for slave labor and mass murder of Black people. We will accept the payment in currency, which will be distributed to our many communities. The American racist has taken part in the slaughter of over 50 million Black people. Therefore, we feel this is a modest demand that we make.
All right, we're going to do a little bit something different for this one, and we are going to play a video.
Let's see what one of us exiles, in the person of Oscar Brown Jr., has to say about his condition.
While we're on that subject, I'd like to take this opportunity to present the following open letter that was pressed into my hands for special delivery by a man on my street. And yeah, he come now. If I'm not mistaken, I once read, back during that short spell I spent in school, where every slave set free was supposed to get the forced slave and 40 acres and a mule. Now, ain't no telling how much work was done by my ancestors under slavery's rule, but sure as hell the total got to run at least 40 acres and a mule. Now, I'm not saying this to see folks sweat, because I'm not bitter, neither am I cruel, but ain't nobody paid for slavery yet. About my 40 acres and my mule. We had a promise that was taken back. And when we hollered, it was hush, be cool. Well, me, I'm being rowdy, hot, and black. I want my 40 acres and my mule. Don't tell me not to get myself upset. Don't look at me like I'm some sort of ghoul. Just answer quietly, when do I get my damn 40 acres and my mule? No thanks, I'll take my own self out to lunch. No thanks, I'll dig me my own swimming pool and lay and play around with my own bunch. If I get 40 acres and a mule, 'cause interest gotta go on just like rent. I may be crazy, but I ain't no fool. 100 years of debt at 10% per year, per 40 acres and per mule. Now, add that up. Ooh, look at that. No wonder y'all call great-grandma Jewel. Yeah, just pay me that and call the whole thing square. Yes, Lordy, 40 acres and a mule.
So let's talk about that video, and let's talk about really what you might know, Tajay, I think this is you, right?
Yes.
About reparations and the government's promise of 40 acres and a mule.
You know, reparations is getting repaid for some of the suffering that we faced, you know, during slavery and back in the days. You know, a lot of 40 acres and a mule is modest compared to the amount of acres that our blood, sweat, and tears lie on in the soil, growing their growing plants and gardens today. So I feel like that's very modest. And you know, as the guy said in the video, don't tell me to be upset about even though it might be 100 years ago. Those 40 acres and the mule is very symbolic of the lack of access and the lack of opportunities that minorities face today. So we have all right to get more than 40 acres of a mule, plus access to greater access and better benefits and opportunities.
The more I read these over and over, all the points, the more related they feel to me and the more the umbrella sort of reveals itself. So the idea of being free, the idea of employment, the idea of free labor, and then going back to the idea of reparations and what's really owed. I can't help but wonder if it's part of our pretending that legacy of slavery is that enslaved people really were like family and like friends, because the more we tell the truth about what happened and the more we educate people about what that experience really was, the more obvious it is to people that something is owed and there is a history of reparations, right? And the complications of land and land ownership that continues today. Oklahoma and that whole situation with having given it to the natives, taken it back, supposed to give it to the African descendants, kept it instead. But also there are some universities, there are some spaces where people are starting to acknowledge, I see stopping stones, like some people are starting to acknowledge, yes, this history is real. We know the between anywhere from Wall Street to some of the most renowned universities, right? That all of that, they're still worth thousands, millions, tens of millions of dollars. You're still earning that today. So how can it not be relevant historically if the money is still continuing to impact people positively today? Then that gap of how many of those spaces we built and cannot be even admitted to has to be addressed, right? And I think that this point that they made in 1966 still stands today and will probably stand in 2066.
Yeah, you know what, Alana, it's so funny though too, and I wouldn't say funny and funny, haha, interesting funny, right? That there's often reference that this happened so long ago and that we couldn't possibly still be living this legacy, but we are. We see the wealth is still part of the legacy. And as far as how long ago it is, I have a grandmother whose grandmother was a slave. And my grandmother is alive and can remember that grandmother, right? So, and we also know what occurs today in our disparities and everything, and generational trauma, that we know that it exists in our DNA, and all of that from 200 years of slavery. That is a long time. And plus 200 more years of subjugation, right? So this idea of reparations being something that is owed from ancestors way back is actually more present and alive today.
Yeah. And when you think about the fact that Jim Crow laws, right, were implemented literally the day slavery ended, it brings you back to point one in that continuum of freedom. And okay, well, you're not an enslaved person. There are a million places you're not allowed to work. There are some laws, I believe North Carolina had a law where you could only be a servant or a farmer, but you didn't own the land, right? But if you ever take a look at Jim Crow laws, they have everything covered from if a white person automatically has the right of way at a stop sign. I mean, they made every effort to make sure that you did not think you were important, did not think you were equal. And if you ever started to think so, you were actually breaking the law.
So for point 4, we want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. We believe that if the landlords will not give decent housing to our Black and oppressed communities, then the housing and the land should be made into cooperatives so that the people in our communities with government aid can build and make decent housing for the people.
Let's talk about it. How can housing be more accessible for some than it is for others?
So I think that for housing, especially like in Vermont, that it's more accessible for the white dominant race than the BIPOC community. Now, with my mom and I, we moved up from Massachusetts after she married my stepfather. And with her marrying into a white family, we were able to inherit our house after our grandparents passed away, and they passed the farmhouse to us. But if it were for her to buy a house and own land, I feel like it would be very difficult to go through that process, especially in a small town, a small rural town. And these benefits of housing, and especially for the BIPOC community, it needs to be more accessible for especially young people in the BIPOC community to be able to move up here if they want to move up to Vermont and live in a community where they're able to access the same housing and livable opportunities as much as the white predominant race in Vermont.
You know, I know that we have a housing crisis happening right now in Vermont. Addie, I know that you have been doing some work in that. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So there is a housing crisis in Vermont right now. There are hundreds of people who are currently staying in motels through a motel program because they don't have another house, they don't have another shelter to live in. And this is a crisis because in a few months, the motel program is going to run out. The state is going to stop the program. So where are people going to go then? A lot of people might become homeless. And that's a huge, huge catastrophe because I believe that housing is a right and it should be something that everyone has access to. And I think that's what the Black Panthers believed as well. So I think it's just really important to see it as a right. And I know that also there's a history of like redlining and housing discrimination along racial lines too. So that neighborhoods were literally the map, there was drawn a line through it so that a certain area was people of color, certain area was white people, and that segregated neighborhoods and led to more poverty. And so there's a lot of inequality in the history of housing. And I think we need to really move forward, try to fix that. That goes back to reparations and goes back to just dealing with those systemic inequalities that it's far time to address.
I think, in terms of housing discrimination, I think there should be more set in place, like laws and policies to help hold landlords and people in control accountable for discrimination, because a lot of people get shut down or don't get access to housing because of things they can't control, the color of their skin, and it goes down to even where they're from, because if they're coming from a place that is supposed to be a lower social class or deemed to be, the language of the ghetto or inner city, a lot of people don't get to move up when they're able to, when they have the credit to do so and the ability to do so. They don't get the opportunity to do so because they're already discriminated because of where they're coming from and the color of their skin.
Yeah, I feel like housing discrimination and just like the complexity of housing and its relationship to race feels like some of the most hidden history we have in the country, between years and years of checking the box if it's a person of color and they automatically disqualify, to people having to feel like they have to use a different name or speak differently when they're calling and then have to figure out how to actually apply. I know my parents certainly had to file a lawsuit to move into the neighborhood I was raised in the 80s. But I think all the way back to the relationship between, sort of like Tajay said about maintaining the standard, the relationship between housing and greed, and just maintaining a legal standard that offers the humanity that people really need in a space they can consider their home. The 1970s, only 4 years after these 10 points were drafted, the Bronx was on fire for an entire decade because landlords thought the Bronx would be worth a whole lot. And when it didn't work out, they burned all those buildings to the ground. The South Bronx, 90% of the South Bronx burned. An entire decade of people who were continuously unhoused because of that greed that was not stopped for years and years. And some people really didn't think about it or talk about it until they saw how much smoke was in the back of a Yankees game, right? Because it was down the block. So what are those implications? What does that actually mean for today, and how similar is that to today, where if you don't have money, you just can't live comfortably? And what does that mean for children? And what is the relationship between housing and where you end up going to school? Like, the implications of your zip code are huge. I mean, we haven't really completely grappled with resolving some of these issues because, like Addie said, those lines are redrawn and there's just no way around it. And we see people go to jail for sending their children to an out-of-district school to try to get them to a better place than the one their neighborhood is zoned to.
So this is point 5. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches our true history and our role in the present day society. We believe that in an educational system that will give to our people a knowledge of self, if you do not have knowledge of yourself and your position in the society and the world, then you will have little chance to know anything else.
Thank you, Addie. So let's talk about that. Right now, we are talking about things like divisive concept laws that are happening all over the country, and including our neighboring state of New Hampshire just passed a divisive concept law, which means they are prohibiting from telling the real truth about history. All of these things that we're talking about, even something like this, the Black Panther Party and the 10-point program and what it's really about, would be prohibited by law with the divisive concept law. So how does that interfere with people's right to learn about American history and your sense of identity?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I feel like it's unacceptable to cut out any part of history because, yeah, history is going to be a little divisive, but if we want to unify, we have to learn about the history of divisiveness so we can fix it. And so if states are just banning the fact that schools can even talk about a certain topic, then how are we going to know how to fix it moving forward? Something I really believe is that education is the key to the future. And so what we teach our young people can change society. So if we're teaching our young people to be anti-racist and inclusive, then that's how society is going to be. But if we're not allowed to learn about things like the Black Panther Party and the true history of our country, then our whole country is going to be missing out. So I think it's really a tragedy that those laws are being passed. And I hope that, by learning these lessons and sharing these lessons, we can try to go against some of that.
Nadia and Tajay, you go to a predominantly white institution. Do you guys see yourself reflected in the education that you receive?
Not at all. I mean, for being a business major, I don't get to learn more about like a lot about history. But there should be some type of history that's established within the business department, especially. I feel as if we're talking about something historic wise, it should be brought up about like everything that has happened in our country based off of that business aspect, but also relates to race and sexual orientation and all sorts of identities. I mean, that I didn't even learn about like the Black Wall Street. I didn't learn about that until I did my own research over the summer. So I feel like Addie said, we need to expose ourselves to the broad perspective that history is not just, based off of this single textbook. It's from all aspects of all different areas of cultures. It's, it's continuing to revolve, but in order to make a difference for our future and our future generations, we need to start from the past and expose those students and future generations to what has occurred in our country and occurred in our world.
Yeah, I feel like knowledge plays a huge part in growth, and because so many people in this predominantly white school and state don't get to learn certain things because there are no classes in place to like teach them about those certain those topics. And that's why certain groups like the NAACP is very important, because even though we're not able to like teach them everything or have conversation about every single thing, they get to see where we're coming from and hear simple details. And a lot of people, if the classes are not teaching them those things, they will not even see the NAACP as important to join and stuff like that. And we can't grow and can't evolve if no one knows certain things and no light is being shed onto certain things. And I feel like it becomes performative when, certain institutions put out that they stand for diversity, they stand for, equality and inclusiveness, but they shut down something like, having certain classes and teaching the raw truth about history, because that's the only way they will know where we're coming from. And when we talk about reparations, they won't think it's extra of us or it's too demanding of us. It's so long gone and stuff like that. If they understood where we're coming from and the things that we have to go through education, they will understand and they will be more authentic in paying it forward with us.
Nothing says I did something wrong more than making it illegal to talk about, like making an actual law to make it impossible to talk about something that has already happened is a pretty deliberate and blatant disregard for people's education, but an effort to mask truths instead of moving forward, right? The real way of moving forward is not to pretend things didn't happen, but to acknowledge, to recognize, and then take the steps for progress.
And I think
well, sorry, it just ensures that it doesn't happen again, right? I mean, that is one thing that we say as Americans, and things that are horrific in our past, right? 9/11, we will never forget, right? We want to teach that history. The Holocaust, we will never forget. We want to teach that history because we do not want to be in those positions again. Go ahead, Nadia.
Oh, I was just gonna say that, even for the future, we've had movements already. I mean, look at the Black Lives Movement that happened during the COVID pandemic. But, those perspectives are kind of altered based off of the lack of history that we're learning in school. And for the people that we are also affiliated with, if we don't acknowledge the knowledge that is there out in the world, the truth knowledge. So I feel as if if we're able to expose ourselves more to those, those diversity concepts of, Black inventors or Asian movie film and creators, we just need to expand that perspective so then people can grow and understand future movements and causes that are happening in our country.
So we for point 6, we want completely free healthcare for all Black and oppressed people. So we believe that the government must provide free of charge for the people health facilities which will not only treat our illnesses, most of which have come about as a result of our oppression, but which will also develop preventative medical programs to guarantee our future survival. We believe that mass health education and research programs must be developed to give all Black and oppressed people access to advanced scientific and medical information so we may provide ourselves with proper medical attention and care.
So, a question to think about: how would free healthcare impact all communities during this pandemic, especially in marginalized communities?
I think free healthcare will help a lot of people because, as you can see, the percentages of people, getting health benefits and even going to hospitals is very low among the minorities. And I feel like even when I look at even small steps like, the NAACP having, booster shot clinics and stuff like that, so that's a step in the right direction. But I feel like if more people, if it comes to greater benefits where people can, get better health care, I think a lot of the percentage of African Americans being sick and feel like they can't go to hospitals will reduce. And a lot of people, not only when it comes to healthcare, even how they're treated in these facilities, a lot of people don't even want to go to hospitals. I did a panel with the NAACP group here at Castleton, and a lot of people talked about the fear of desperate treatment in hospitals and healthcare facilities, being that they're overlooked and they will have to wait until someone else, they're done with a certain race before they're looked at or even approached. So a lot of it comes with a lot of it comes with, that's a part of the respiration we need, because a lot of us, even when we were slaves, when we were sick, we couldn't go to hospitals. We had to, power through it or die. We weren't getting the attention that we desperately need. And even today, when it comes to healthcare facilities and, benefits, we don't have the same benefits and we don't have the same opportunities as it pertains to healthcare. And I feel like there's a lot to be done there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I know this kind of really ties to what you were saying, Tajay, but that there's a history of inequity and what's the word? A history of inequity in the medical system as it pertains to people of color. And so not being treated well by like hospitals or not receiving proper health care. There's a history of inequity, and that has led to today, like Tajay said, less people wanting to get care, less people feeling safe when they go to get care. And that's something really, especially during a pandemic, really an injustice. And having free healthcare for everyone and placing trust back in people's minds in terms of like the healthcare is really, really important. And I think a step that we should be taking.
Yeah, I think that the healthcare gap is tremendous. So it sounds like we're talking about two things. One, the gap to access to healthcare at all. And then the second one, the affordable healthcare. And then the second one is how much quality is offered in that care, right? So there are so many studies that talk about doctors and medical healthcare professionals not really thinking that we experience the same level of pain, which is definitely a detraction from our humanity. That to somehow think that we don't experience pain the same is really a way of saying, I don't really think you're a person to the same extent, right? The numbers of we're overrepresented in COVID cases are women who are giving birth have higher rates of mortality for themselves and their children. And that's for BIPOC women. That's comparable to some underdeveloped islands and nations right here in this very first world country. So there's definitely a lot to think about. And I think that even though, like we said, this was written in the 60s, it is something that we're still thinking about today all the time for all marginalized communities, not just BIPOC communities, but for people with low socioeconomic status, right? And how hard it is to really feel taken care of in these situations.
Yes.
I also like to add that how a lot of people are so used to, getting certain care from the hospitals, and, because of lack of insurance or the lack of the ability to get certain access to those, they end up getting charges like such heavy charges that now they're questioning whether or not even if they get something like the booster shot or even the COVID vaccination shot, will they get like, will certain things come in the mail? And it takes a lot of research and, providing the information to everyone and making that readily available. But a lot of, history that has come from healthcare affects that. So for 7, we want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people, other people of color, and all oppressed people inside the United States. So we believe that the racist and fascist government of the United States uses its domestic enforcement agencies to carry out its program of oppression against Black people, other people of color, and poor people inside the United States. We believe it is our right, therefore, to defend ourselves against such armed forces, and that all Black and oppressed people should be armed for self-defense of our homes and communities against these fascist police forces.
So let's do a little bit of something different here, and let's talk about that and in relation, as we've been talking, in relation to today. So this is a graphic here, and that 99% of killings of police of all people from 2013 to 2019 has not resulted in officers being charged with an actual crime, right? So you see, look at that's what 99% represents. And then those officers that have been charged are very limited, and those have been convicted is basically non-existent, right? We have one little tier here. And then when we put that in proportion to Black people, most Black people are likely to be, this is between 2013 and 2019, which is like, what, two years ago, right? 3 times are more likely to be killed by police than white people, proportionately. And 1.3 times are more likely to be unarmed when they're murdered by police, right? And so we had this reckoning when we all witnessed the murder of George Floyd, and everybody started having these conversations. And right now we're still having those conversations with very little progress, right? In my eyes. Right now we have a ending qualified immunity, which would give people a little bit of accountability, at least in a civil court, to hold police officers who do egregious things like murder people, have some accountability in a civil litigation in civil court. And yet we still have police officers and police agencies talking about how that would put their police in danger. Let's talk about that, Tajay. As a Black man who drives,
Yes.
how do you feel about this?
To be quite honest, I have a car, but I don't drive it that much. That's how scared I am. I don't really, as an international student coming to America and seeing so many things happening, with George Floyd and all the things that happen right before my eyes, sometimes I don't even want to drive. And that speaks for itself, because I've had even peers, as executive in the NAACP chapter here, we've invited the police over to have conversation, because even a peer within my group faced that same, police stopping them and harassing them for no reason, just to let them go, and that unsafe feeling is what stirs up a lot of the conversation, why people are feeling less, people don't want to even drive for more than an hour nowadays if you're a Black man or Black woman in America. You don't feel safe. And even last semester when we did the the blackout event against police brutality, and hearing all the stories, and the great thing about that was the representation that was there and the diversity that was there, and to see that a lot of people, not only us, are seeing what is happening. And I feel like if a lot of people join the effort and really speak out against it and rally behind the cause, there will be a lot of effort and a lot of push forward. But I feel like there's a lot more to be done, and if police are not being held accountable, and when you look, people being unarmed, and how many of these cases go unnoticed and get thrown out, I think that is what creates a pattern that is okay, and that it will never stop, because they feel like they're less likely to face the consequences of their action. but yeah, we have to suffer through it.
I agree with Tajay. I also want to relate that even though Black men are more susceptible to get pulled over by a police officer when traveling, Black women are just like not as nearly as bad, but just as prone to being pulled over just based off of our skin tone. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
for living in Vermont, there was times that I've been pulled over for not even a probable cause and not given a ticket because of a suspicion on where I'm going or where I'm going to, where I'm coming from. And I feel that it's based off of the lack of assumptions or the lack of knowledge that maybe the driver is just, coming from a job and they're just speeding because they're rushing to get home to their child or something. Instead of creating that false assumption that, that this person looks, suspicious, or this based off of their skin color or their identity. So I feel as if it may seem as, an over exaggeration that Black people are more prone to get pulled over than a white person, but it's the truth. And it's, especially in Vermont, it's more seen that since the lack of diversity that exists in our state, it's more that we're more seen as like a suspicion because there's not many people of color in Vermont. So it's like, oh, what is this person of color doing here? It's like, are they out of state? And if they live in Vermont, what are they doing here? What are their affiliations?
Absolutely. There's a racial bias in when it comes to policing in general across the United States. But when you add that this is a majority white state and the police officers are majority white themselves.
The historical element of policing, that it started from the very beginning to chase slaves and find enslaved people. Many of the time, oftentimes when they actually were free and were bound back to slavery, or enslaved people who had escaped. And that there's been a continuation of like over policing Black bodies that has gone on ever since. That's always been part of how policing in this country is operated.
So point 8, we want an immediate end to all wars of aggression. We believe that the various conflicts which exist around the world stem directly from the aggressive desires of the US ruling circle and the government to force its domination upon the oppressed people of the world. We believe that if the US government or its lackeys do not cease these aggressive wars, that it is the right of the people to defend themselves by any means necessary against their aggressors.
All right, so what do we think about this point? Do you guys have any thoughts about the relationship between what our government does abroad that we often don't even know about or have not either are entirely not privy to as civilians, or are often not honestly paying attention to some of the like different types of elections, right? Different little items that move forward. So what do we think is how we are impacted by some of those decisions, and this point about wanting to end all aggressions worldwide?
I think at the time that this particular point was made, we were in a conflict, the Vietnam conflict, and the majority of the people who were served and dying in that conflict were Black people, and we were trying to understand even the point and purpose of that. And as we fast forward to today, there have been conflicts in the Middle East, right, that we also question what our presence is there and how that is serving to protect us as a nation. And so I think these are questions that the Black Panther Party really resonated with in their own treatment and our own treatment here in America, and how that expanded abroad as well.
So point 9, we want freedom for all Black and poor oppressed people now held in US federal, state, county, city, and military prisons and jails. We want trials by a jury of peers for all persons charged with so-called crimes under the laws of this country. We believe that the many Black and poor oppressed people now held in US prisons and jails have not received fair and impartial trials under a racist and fascist judicial system and should be free from incarceration. We believe in the ultimate elimination of all wretched, inhuman penal institutions because the masses of men and women imprisoned inside the United States or by the US military are the victims of oppressive conditions which are the real cause of their imprisonment. We believe that when persons are brought to trial, they must be guaranteed by the United States juries of their peers, attorneys of their choice, and freedom from imprisonment while awaiting trials.
Wow, thank you, Addie. I'm going to bring a little bit of Vermont perspective into this when it talks to the penal system and imprisonment in general. So this table is talking about the rates of incarceration, right? According to the rank. Look at where Vermont stands. We are third in the nation in proportion to Black male and female incarceration. Considering that this is, again, predominantly white state, that Vermont would be so far up, third in rank, proportionately in their incarceration, what does that tell you?
I mean, I think it says a lot about Vermont. A lot of people often say, oh, how Vermont is so progressive. Vermont has a lot of issues that it needs to deal with, that it needs to confront, face on. And I think that this incarceration disparities are one of those things. And it relates to the school to prison pipeline too, and how oftentimes this incarceration begins in schools where kids are supposed to feel safe, where instead they feel targeted by police officers. So the system of incarceration operates through so many different systems, and it's really an injustice in Vermont that if Vermont really wants to say it's promoting racial justice and equality, Vermont really has to address the fact that we're third on this list.
Absolutely. You know what, and it might even reference to that jury of peers, right? When you're in a state that is predominantly white, how do you get a jury of peers?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? I personally receive a lot of complaints in terms of the criminal justice system. Well, I receive complaints from every system, but the criminal justice system in particular, obviously because of statistics like this. And a lot of times we find that a lot of plea arrangements, back deal arrangements are made by public defenders and prosecutors that don't even have the input of the people who are involved in this. And a lot of times, even if they have not committed a crime, or they don't feel like they should receive the same type of punishment that other people with different colors of skin, they feel like they have to plea out and take these things in order to really just move past whatever. So I think a lot of that is indicative in these numbers here.
Yeah, as I said, when it comes to like the criminal justice system and the jury and the jails and incarceration units and stuff like that, it all goes back to education. The fact that they refuse to like incorporate certain history courses and classes where they can learn the foundation and why certain things that we had to go through to get to where we are. They don't feel the importance of equality and stuff like that, and they don't feel the importance of some of the things that sometimes we're targeted because of the way we dress, the way we speak or tone and stuff like that. A lot of that is the reason why we're targeted. If we wear black and a hoodie in a store at night, we're targeted for attempts. They think we're going there to steal, and we're masking ourselves when it's just, if anyone else wore it, any other race wore it, would be no target and no issue. But if we walk in the store with our hands in our pockets, they think we're stealing and stuff like that. And those are some of the things that people get incarcerated for. And because we don't have the basic history and knowledge and representation to avoid that, that's why the numbers are the way they are. Because in a predominantly white state, we're easy to get picked out and targeted.
So for point 10, we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, peace, and people's community control of modern technology. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one person to dissolve the political brands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and the equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them. A decent respect to the opinions of the mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
Let's play a video.
Black and sexy, baby.
Hey y'all, it's Lexual, aka Alexis Joan Day of Intellectual Media, and this is 2-Minute History. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Black Panther Party and their social program. The 10th point of the Black Panther Party 10-point program was we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. Sensing the government wouldn't be too helpful in these matters, the Black Panthers decided to take control, mainly when it came to bread, housing, and education. Huey P. Newton was inspired by the Little Red Book to create social programs. One of the most popular was the Free Breakfast for Children program, which started in 1969. Typical breakfasts included bacon, eggs, grits, and toast. Over breakfast, Panthers gave talks on wealth disparity and racism in the United States. Thousands of children in 19 cities were fed every day with this program. It was an instrumental part to making the community better. The Black Panther Party implemented dozens of other programs that were meant to enrich the community. From providing clothing, medical care, early childhood education classes, and legal aid, they did it all. Part of the reason why FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was so eager to get rid of the Black Panthers is because of these social programs. However, it was the free breakfast program that shone the brightest, so much so that it deepened the divide between Eldridge Cleaver and Huey P. Newton. Cleaver, who turned out to be a Republican later in life, thought that focusing on the free breakfast program and other Serve the People programs were going to ruin the Black Panther Party. He thought it weakened the party's stance of revolution by any means necessary. Huey saw the free breakfast and other Serve the People programs as instrumental parts to the Black Panther Party's functioning. He believed that's how the Black Panther Party would be revolutionary.
Black and sexy, baby.
So let's talk about that a little bit.
I thought with the video, when they just described the cons of each Black Panther founders of ideas of the social programs, or I thought that with what Huey Newton was saying for the Revolutionary Act on what these programs can offer was a good representation of what the Black Panther Party stands for, because they want to better their community, but it also starts off with the younger generation, and to begin that transition of bettering their community and bettering the accessibilities that they can be given, even though our government doesn't always provide them to the BIPOC community. We need to start with the education of the younger generations and just to establish that foundation that this is what our community is like and how our government is treating us. And for us to get places, or for us to to progress and to receive respect, we need to start to take the steps that we should be provided just like as anyone else in America.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's also like, we often think of revolutionary as maybe like, violent or like, shaking things up. But like, I think that it was really important that Huey Newton thought of the breakfast program as revolutionary, because that's like a nonviolent, it helps the community, and that's a way to be revolutionary too. And so I think that it's just like the connotation that we put with that word. And I know it was talking about how like J. Edgar Hoover was like against the Black Panthers and trying to stop what they're doing because of those breakfast programs, because, maybe it's crazy that that's a revolutionary thing in the first place, because like free breakfast for the community should just be how it is. And I think that just shows how vital the Black Panther Party was with these breakfast programs and things like that.
And I mean, free breakfast is offered to students in schools now. I mean, so look where the revolutionary has changed to. I mean, it's altering for all students. I mean, early childhood education, early college education. It's not, it should be seen for anyone of any identity to be accessible to, not just the predominant race.
Yeah, with this lack of access, for BIPOC people, it's very important to have a community like we touched on earlier, the importance of community where we can come together and create these resources and these avenues where we can access certain things, like community breakfast programs. And even a lot of people take, watch what the Black Panther did, and they're executing it today, as a way to meet our needs when we're not getting the access that we need from the government and the country. So, with breakfast programs and even the booster clinic, that the Rutland branch NAACP offered, those are some of the things that we take from, history and bring to current years so that we can bridge a gap a little and, create spaces and resources for ourselves so that we can move on.
I mean, basically, it's the premise that if they're not going to provide it for you, we're going to do it ourselves, right? And some of the other things that the Black Panther Party did was sickle cell anemia tests, right? That is a disease that is predominantly that is found in African Americans, and it was not tested for it back then. So you didn't even know if you had sickle cell anemia until it was too late, right? And so that was one of the programs. And just so when we talk about all of the points of the 10-point program that they put forward, the social programs to kind of fill the gaps where the government wasn't doing that, I think it was really important, and as Addie noted, revolutionary, right? And it's the way that even how we have had to operate is, if they're not going to take care of us, we need to take care of ourselves in which ways we can, with whatever little means we might have to take care of our future, right? So with that, this has been quite an adventure with you guys, and great discussion with you. There's so much to know about the Black Panther Party, including how they have been stigmatized, during the time that they were operating in full force. There's still pockets of Black Panther Party people. It now is not gone, but certainly not to when the vision that the founders, Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, Albert Howard, had envisioned. But I did want to encourage anybody who, yourselves here and our students here, to continue learning more about the Black Panther Party, and also our audience to look into more in the injustices that were had with the government and J. Edgar Hoover and COINTELPRO. We could probably do several more trainings on just the Black Panther Party itself. So we will be providing some resources at this video, at the end of this video, in the comments of this video. So look for those. And I just encourage everyone to do this research, because this is that history that is much lacking from our educational system. Thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate you.
And if you're a teacher who has been using this information and using this presentation and would like to share your feedback of how it went well, or anything you think we should have changed, please contact me here at vp3@naacprutland.org. And if you have any other questions, or you just like to share your thoughts and opinions, I'm happy to hear them. So please reach out anytime.
And it has been a pleasure meeting with these young people and talking about the 10-point program of the Black Panther Party. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.